Welcome to my recap movie. In the near future, overpopulation and climate change brought global destruction to Earth. An organization known as the Uniting Ranger Corps is formed in order to organize an evacuation of the planet. And humanity gets to settle in a space colony called Nova Prime. Seeing as humans are now vulnerable, a race of aliens called Skrill sends a bunch of verses to invade. These verses are vicious predators that were brought to kill humans. And although they're blind, they are able to hunt people by detecting the pheromones they secrete when frightened. To stop the invasion, the Rangers fight the Ursus with their blades, and Prime Commander Cypher proves himself a hero when he learns how to suppress his emotions. By not showing any fear, a person becomes invisible to the Ursus. This is a technique known as ghosting. A few years after the war, Cypher's son Kadar is a cadet of the Ranger Academy because he wants to be like his father. Even during the most basic of tests like jogging, he puts extra effort just to prove he's special. However, while his test scores are great, he isn't doing well in the field, and Kadar doesn't get the promotion to Ranger that he wanted yet. Later in the evening, when Cypher returns home from a mission, Kadar tells him he's failed to get promoted. Instead of showing comfort toward his son, Cypher stays cold as usual and comments, "I must have not been ready," because the commander knows what he's doing. Cypher always acts cold toward his family, as if he didn't know how to turn off the sold mode, even demanding Kadar to always call him sir and yelling orders at him at the table. After dinner, Cypher brings his wife a gift got from the mission and tells her that he'll be leaving the next day for Epido to train cadets. However, after that mission is over, he intends to retire and work with her in the admin department. Fire is glad to hear that and points out he needs to spend more time with Good. I chat with him and be less distant. The Thai needs a father, not a commanding officer. She thinks Kadar has lots of insecurities because he blames himself for the death of his sister Century and tries to connect with her by reading her favorite book, Moby Dick. With this in mind, Cypher approaches Kadar and tells him he'll come to a photo with him sometime later. The crew gets ready to leave, and Contain notices a ranger with an amputated leg approaching his father to express his gratitude for saving him during the war with the Ursus. Cypher thinks it's not necessary, but the ranger still asks his friends to help him stand up to salute partly as a sign of respect for humanity's hero. Once the trip beings, Kadar tries to connect with his father and tells him he's reading Moby Dick, but Cypher isn't much of a talker and keeps his answer short and cold. Then he tells Ty that he should sleep for the rest of the journey. Guitar pretends to obey, but once Cypher is asleep, he leaves his seat to explore the ship. He finds a mysterious area with warning signs, but he enters anyway, and the guarding rangers immediately scold him for it. However, when they realize the Cypher's son, they allow him to come in and see their cargo. It turns out they're transporting an Ursa, which will be used to teach the cadets how to ghost. The ranger dares Kadar to touch the Ursa shell and test his emotional control, but when Kadai begins walking closer, he begins having flashbacks of the night his sister died. An Ursa had attacked their home, and Century put Kadai inside the glass containment to keep the monster from smelling him. Right when Kadar is about to touch the shell, the Ursa smells his fear and roars at him, startling him into stepping back. Meanwhile, Cypher wakes up and senses some strange vibrations, so he uses his ring against the ship wall to confirm there's danger coming. He rushes to tell the Rangers to be on full alert and orders Kadar to put on his life suit and strap himself to a seat. Then Cypher goes to the cockpit and informs the pilots that they're heading toward an asteroid storm. Before they can correct their course, the ship begins shaking as it gets hit by the asteroids, making it lose an engine. Cypher orders the pilots to end of the nearest wormhole, that way they can travel to a different anchorage. The ship crosses the wormhole safely and appears near Earth, which the law says nobody should return to because of its day rangers. Cypher wants to head somewhere else, but the pilots explain the ship has taken too much damage, meaning they must land as soon as possible. As the ship gets closer to Earth's atmosphere, it began shaking again, and Kadar panics, so Cypher guides him to take deep breaths to calm him down. At that moment, the ship begins breaking apart, and Cypher is blown away by the wind as Guitar falls unconscious. A moment later, Kadar wakes up and discovers the ship has crashed. He leaves his seat to look for the others, but all the Rangers who finds are dead. Luckily, he finds Cypher and confirms he's still alive, so Kadar sits by his side and waits for him to wake up. When Cypher gains consciousness, I explain to him that the ship's tail is gone, meaning the Ursa is gone as well. Cypher guides Kadar to the car to find the emergency beacon, but when he tries to use it, he discovers it's broken. Afterwards, I put Cypher on a stretcher and takes him to the ship's main computer, where Cypher checks the inventory and confirms there is another beacon in the ship's tail. Since both his legs are hurt, Cypher gives Katter the mission to find the tail, which the scanner says it's about 100 kilometers away. Then Cypher gives Katter has been said plus 6 vials of air filtration inhalers that will help him breathe and Earth's hostile environment. He also informs him that the life suit in the backpack of cameras so Cypher will see everything Katter sees. The boy needs to be really careful because everything on Earth has evolved to kill humans, which makes Katter remember how he had to watch his sister being killed by an Ursa. The eye asked Cypher about the Ursa that they were carrying, and Cypher thinks it must have died in the crash, but it's safer to assume it's still out there. After taking one of the inhalers, Cat Eye leaves the ship and gets very nervous because he can see all the bodies around. To calm him down, Cypher makes him take the knee and reminds him to concentrate on the moment to overcome his fears. Then Katter begins his journey, which allows him to meet lots of animals he's never seen in his life. When he's climbed a cliff, he's startled by a spider on his hand, and when he reaches the top, he sees birds flying through the sky and cattle grazing on the plains. It's a stunning view, especially for someone that always lived in space. At that moment, Cypher releases a bunch of probes to find the Ursa, and he reminds Katter that the temperature heavily drops at night. To survive, he must find one of the many hotspots before it gets dark. Then Cypher scans his own injuries and confirms his leg bones are broken, making him consider taking some medicine to fight the pain. However, the label warns him that the shot could make him drowsy and impair his vision, and this makes Cypher think of the time his daughter called him during the war. Century had found an original copy of Moby Dick, which was a big deal because real books weren't around anymore. Cypher had acted very cool toward her enthusiasm, and now he's starting to regret it, so he decides not to take the medicine. Moments later, Katter notices his suit has turned black. Cypher explains it's equipped with motion sensors, and the color black means there's a life form coming for him. Suddenly, a large bamboo emerges from the woods, and Cypher advises Katter to stay still. However, Kud prefers tossing a rocket to try to scare it away. This causes a whole group of baboons to come out and begin throwing rocks at Tage. The boy begins running as fast as possible, and Cypher guides him toward the nearest river to keep the baboons from following him. The Tage quickly crosses the river, but even if the baboons aren't following him anymore, he keeps running with his blade out because he's too nervous and scared. Cypher has to yell at him to make him stop and take the knee so he'll calm down. At that moment, Cypher notices there are toxins in Katter's bloodstream and asked his son to check his body. The Tage discovers he has a leech on his hand and immediately takes it off, but the toxin is still in his system. Cypher gives him instructions to inject the antidote, but since he's starting not to feel his hands anymore, Katter has to drop his body on the needle to make it stick, and falls unconscious. A few hours later, Cypher notices the temperature is going down and forces Katter to wake up to find a hotspot which is 10 kilometers away. The Tage begins running as fast as he can, and while Cypher watches his son, he hears the computer inform him he needs an arterial shot to treat his leg. Once again, Cypher refuses to take the medicine and goes through the procedure while enduring the pain. As he works, he thinks about Century's 19th birthday celebration, which he had to watch through a screen because he was on a mission. Century asked him to blow out the candles on her cake, and Cypher only accepted after lots of begging. The candles went out because younger Katter blew them for him. When Kodai finally reaches the hotspot, he checks his equipment and discovers 2 inhalers are broken, but he lies to his dad and says he's got them all. Cypher sees reaction on the screen that may indicate lying but doesn't say more. The Tage takes a violin, hides under a tree while it begins to rain, so he uses the chance to ask his dad how he managed to ghost during the war. Cypher tells him and Ursa once stabbed him in his shoulder with its pincer, and during the struggle they fell into the river. The Ursa tried to drown him, but when Cypher accepted his death, the pincher came out because the Ursa couldn't find him anymore. Cypher had understood that fear wasn't real even if anger exists. It's only a thing in people's thoughts about the future. The next morning, Cypher sends Katter to the waterfall because the probes have found some interesting readings. On his way there, Katter sees a pile of dead monkeys, proof of a greater danger. Once Good Time makes it to the falls, Cypher makes him to check his inventory, and Katter tries to lie about the inhalers again. Cypher calls out his lie and makes some calculations that indicate Kodai won't be able to finish the mission without the inhalers. Thus, he orders him to abort the mission. The Tage begins thinking about how he had to watch Senshi die and refuses to do that with his dad, so he tells Cypher he won't be a coward again. In fact, he thinks Cypher is the coward because he had been home to protect his family when the Ursa attacked. Cypher ignores the jab and insists that Katter should turn around, but Kudai ignores him and jumps off the false using his suit to glide through the air. At that moment a huge condor shows up and begins chasing him, so Katter tries to steer to hide behind the waterfalls. However, they are fast, and as soon as Guitar comes out the bird attacks him. The time falls unconscious and Cypher loses all communication with him. Moments later Cypher wakes up in the condor's nest with its chicks. He tries to leave quietly, but suddenly several lions show up trying to get inside to eat. The condor attacks the pride, but many of them dodge it and keep on trying to enter. The time manages to throw a lion out and the condor grabs another, but when a third lion comes in and Katter has no choice but to use his blade. He doesn't want to fight, so instead he cuts a hole in the ground to make the lion fall. Once all the lions are gone, Cat-Eye leaves the nest and he's devastated to see the condor mourning the death of all its chicks. Afterwards, Katter tries to contact his dad only to discover his communicator is broken. Back in the ship, Cypher gets images from his drone showing the bodies of the rangers hanging on a tree, which means the Ursa is out and about. Cypher decides to record a message for his wife simply saying he's lost their son. Meanwhile, Katter keeps traveling through the forest and hides inside a cave to avoid the night cold. Inside he finds drawings left by the caveman and many dangerous serpents that he avoids just in time. He makes some calculations about the distance he has left in his inventory. The chances aren't good, but he needs to try anyway. The next morning, Cat-Eye leaves the cave and notices the contours following him. Thinking at once to attack, Cat-Eye begins running away, and soon he needs to use his last inhaler. Afterwards, I build a small raft to sail down the river. When he takes a nap to rest, he dreams of Century appearing next to him and he tries. On the day of her death, he almost left the containment to help her, since she doesn't believe him, but she doesn't mind because she thinks he did the right thing by saving himself. She also thinks Cypher is mad at himself for what happened. Then Katter tries to recite Moby Dick to prove he's been reading it, but Century yells at him to wake up. The Thai opens his eyes and discovers the raft has reached land. The temperature's starting to drop, so Katter rushes to find a hot spot, but he isn't fast enough and falls unconscious on the ground as the plants surrounding and freeze. Guitar thinks he'll die, but when he wakes up in the morning, he discovers something on top of him that kept him warm. It turns out it's the condor who died to save him as thanks for fighting for its chicks. After thanking the creature, Katter continues his journey. It's getting hard to breathe, but finding a piece of the ship on the ground inspires him to keep going. Moments later, Kudai finally finds the ship's tail and he immediately puts his hands on more inhalers and a new blade. Then he investigates the area and finds the Ursa shell is open, confirming the monster left. Back on the ship, Cypher is dreaming about little Katter handing him his own blade. He's suddenly woken up by Kudai's voice because he's found a communicator and the beacon in the ship's tail. Cypher tries to talk to him, but Kudai can't hear him because he's in the black zone. Guitar doesn't know this and tries to use the beacon anyway, but it doesn't work. Frustrated and desperate, Cat-Eye begins throwing a tantrum, but soon he remembers his father's advice and takes the need to calm himself down. The Thai realizes that there's an interference in the area, and the climbing the neighboring volcano should allow him to activate the beacon without obstructions. On his way to the volcano, I finds the body of a ranger with the Ursa left there to scare him and trigger his pheromones. The tries his best to ignore it and keeps going until he reaches the base of the volcano, where he tries to launch the beacon again and fails. Cypher notices the Ursa on the scanner and hopes his son acts fast before he's found. Then Katter enters the cave to try to find a way to the top of the volcano. Inside he finds the Ursa waiting for him, and the monster immediately attacks only to get trapped under a pile of rocks in the process. The Thai begins running as the Ursa frees itself and chases him, so the boy decides to hide in a pool of water. Back on the ship, the computer starts failing and Cypher loses access to the medical treatment, causing him to begin losing consciousness. Meanwhile, Katter swims toward a source of light that allows him to resurface into a pit. When he starts to climb it to reach the top of the volcano, the Ursa suddenly jumps out of the water and grabs the boy's foot. Guitar kicks the beast to send it back into the water, then finishes climbing the pit to come outside. Immediately, Katter tries to activate the beacon, but the Ursa returns and jumps on him, hitting him on the rocks and making him drop the gadget. As Kud wiggles on the ground in pain, he remembers the day Century protected him and all the advice Cypher has given him, allowing Katter to finally concentrate and overcome his fear, achieving ghosting. The creature loses track of him and Katter takes advantage of its confusion to attack it with his blade. Since the beast can't defend itself, it only takes quite a few precise strikes finally kill it. All this is seen by Cypher before he loses consciousness for good. Afterwards, Kudai finally fires the beacon, and in a few hours the Rangers arrive to rescue them. The Tai's worried about his dad, but when he checks on him he confirms he's fine. Cypher forces his sore body to stand up to salute his son with respect for his bravery. But Katter runs to hug his father as he says he wants to work with his mom. For the first time ever, Cypher hugs back and responds he also wants to retire. Thanks for watching.